I found the hidden key to a safety deposit box filled with his jewelry. It sounds like the opening to some cheap thriller novel, right? Like I'm some kind of femme fatale or a desperate treasure hunter. But the truth is, it was just another Tuesday. Almost. Before we dive into how this whole messy thing unraveled, and believe me, it unraveled in ways I still can't fully process, do me a solid and hit that subscribe button. You know, the red one. And while you're there, give this story a like if you're digging it so far. Share it with anyone who might appreciate a dose of raw, unvarnished reality, and definitely drop a comment below. Let me know what you think, what you would have done, or if you've ever been in a similar boat. Your engagement genuinely helps keep these stories coming. Okay, back to Tuesday, or what should have been a Tuesday. It was late October, the kind of crisp, cool air that bites at your cheeks and makes you want to pull your hoodie tighter. Leaves were doing their thing, a riot of red and gold plastered across the suburban streets of Northwood. My street, specifically. Same old sidewalks, same old perfectly manicured lawns. It was the kind of neighborhood where people waved as you drove by, or at least pretended to. I was heading home from my job at the downtown law firm. I'm a paralegal, and the traffic was its usual purgatory, stuck behind a minivan with its blinker on for 3 solid blocks, making no move to turn. Classic. My husband, David, was supposed to be home already. He worked from home mostly, consulting for some tech startup. Said it was flexible. I always assumed that meant he was lounging around in sweatpants, playing video games. Little did I know. When I pulled into our driveway, the garage door opener whirred to life, and the familiar side of our 2 cars, his sleek black sedan and my reliable Subaru, greeted me. Except his car wasn't parked in its usual spot. It was haphazardly shoved into the corner of the driveway, half on the grass. That was the first flicker. David was meticulous, borderline obsessive about his car. It gleamed, always. Seeing it like that, like it had been parked in a rush by someone who didn't care, it was a tiny, discordant note in the symphony of our predictable life. I parked the Subaru, grabbed my work bag, and walked around to the front door. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Usually, by the time I got home, I could hear the faint tinny sounds of whatever team he was playing, or the clack of his keyboard. Nothing. I let myself in, the familiar scent of coffee and something vaguely like ozone, his latest gadget obsession, filling the air. "Dave?" I called out, my voice echoing a little in the stillness. No answer. I dropped my bag by the entryway table, the one with the little ceramic dish where we always dumped keys and loose change. Except there were no keys in it. His car keys, usually there, were missing. My stomach gave a little lurch. I walked through the house, calling his name again, a little louder this time. The living room was immaculate, just as I'd left it this morning. The kitchen was clean, no dirty dishes in the sink. The home office, usually a controlled chaos of tech gear and paperwork, was eerily tidy. His desk was cleared, not a stray pen in sight. That was definitely not David. He'd leave a trail of breadcrumbs from his desk to the coffee machine. This was sterile, like someone had wiped the slate clean. A chill started to snake its way up my spine. I checked our bedroom. The bed was made, perfectly. Too perfectly. David never made the bed, ever. He just tossed the duvet back and call it good. My mind, always prone to jumping to the worst-case scenarios, started spinning. Had something happened? An accident? I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling slightly as I scrolled through my contacts. David. I hit the call button. It rang, and rang, straight to voicemail. His voice, that smooth, reassuring baritone, asked me to leave a message. I hung up before it could finish. My heart was starting to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I tried texting. "Hey, you home? Everything okay? Where's your car?" No immediate reply. I decided to check the garage. Maybe he'd taken his bike out. He'd mentioned wanting to get back into cycling. I opened the door from the kitchen into the garage. The usual clutter was there. Bikes, tools, boxes of old college junk. But something was off. His black sedan was still there, parked in its weird, grass-stained spot. And next to it, on a workbench that was usually covered in dust and forgotten projects, was a small, worn leather case. It looked old, like something you'd find in your grandfather's attic. It wasn't a toolbox. It wasn't anything I recognized. Curiosity, a dangerous beast, tugged at me. I walked over to it. It was unlocked. I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the latch. A knot of unease tightened in my gut. This felt wrong, invasive. But the silence in the house, David's absence, the misplaced car, it was all screaming at me that something was very, very wrong. I clicked open the latch. Inside, nestled in faded velvet lining, wasn't tools. It was jewelry, not cheap costume stuff either. I recognized some of it. The delicate sapphire pendant I'd given him for our anniversary 2 years ago, a thick silver bracelet he'd bought on a trip to Montana, and a few other pieces, a watch, some rings, all his, all expensive, and all neatly arranged as if for display. My breath hitched. Why would he have all his jewelry in a random leather case on his workbench? And why was it hidden? This wasn't him. This was someone else. Someone I didn't know. I picked up the sapphire pendant. It felt cold in my hand. He rarely wore it, said it was too flashy. But here it was, alongside other things he seemingly kept tucked away. A wave of confusion washed over me, quickly followed by a rising tide of dread.
My mind went back to the odd hours, the vague explanations for his absences, the way he'd sometimes get that distant look in his eyes when I asked him about his day. I carefully placed the pendant back, my fingers trembling. I closed the case, the click of the latch sounding unnervingly loud in the quiet garage. I needed to understand. I needed to know what this meant. I scanned the workbench, my eyes searching for any clue, any explanation. And that's when I saw it. Tucked beneath a stack of old gardening magazines, almost completely hidden, was a small, tarnished brass key. It was old-fashioned, the kind with a rounded head. My heart leaped. A key? To what? A safety deposit box, the thought whispered in my mind. Why else would he have a hidden case of his most valuable jewelry? I picked up the key. It was surprisingly heavy. It felt significant. I looked at the jewelry case again. Was this all he kept in there? Or was this just a sample, a collection of his safe assets? The questions hammered at me. I felt a cold, hard knot of suspicion forming in my chest, a feeling I'd tried to ignore for months, pushing it down with logic and self-assurance. But this was tangible evidence of something hidden, something he didn't want me to find. I pocketed the key, my hand closing tightly around it. I looked at his black sedan, still sitting there like a silent accuser. I needed to know where he'd been. I needed to know what he was hiding. The thought of calling the police, of reporting him missing, felt premature, but the thought of him being hurt, or worse, was unbearable. Yet this jewelry, this hidden case, this key, it all pointed to something else entirely, something calculated. I went back into the house, the silence now oppressive. I sat down at the kitchen island, the key still in my pocket, its weight a constant reminder of the unknown. I stared at my phone, the screen dark. Who do you call when you suspect your husband is hiding something significant enough to warrant a secret stash of jewelry and a hidden key? My friends? They'd just tell me I was overthinking things, that David was a good guy. My parents? They'd go into full panic mode. I decided to go through his office again. This time I wasn't looking for tidy. I was looking for clues. I opened his desk drawers. The top one was mostly office supplies, pens, stapler, etc. The second drawer held a few financial statements. Nothing out of the ordinary, just bills. The third drawer, however, that's where I found it. Tucked away in the back, beneath a stack of old notebooks, was a small, unmarked manila envelope. My hands were shaking as I pulled it out. It felt thin. I opened it. Inside were a few pieces of paper, bank statements, but not from our joint accounts. These were from an account I'd never seen before. And the transactions? They were large, regular withdrawals, dates and amounts that didn't correspond with anything I knew about our finances. And then there was a small folded piece of paper, a receipt, from a jewelry store downtown, dated about 3 months ago. The name of the store? I knew it. It was a high-end place, the kind of place you went for significant purchases. The receipt was for a diamond necklace, a very expensive diamond necklace. My breath caught in my throat. My mind reeled. Why would he buy a diamond necklace and stash it away? And then I remembered. About 4 months ago, he'd gone on a business trip to Chicago. He'd been gone for 3 days. He'd come back with a new watch. He'd said he'd gotten a good deal. It was nice, but he'd never mentioned buying anything else. He'd always been so transparent about our finances, or so I thought. We had a joint checking account, a savings account, shared credit cards. We talked about money, or I thought we did. I looked at the bank statements again. The withdrawals were consistent, coinciding with the approximate time of his business trips. The jewelry store receipt? It all clicked into place with a sickening thud. He wasn't just hiding jewelry, he was spending money on someone else, on another woman. The thought hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. The carefully constructed facade of our perfect life began to crumble, piece by piece. I sank onto the floor. The papers spread out around me. The initial shock gave way to a searing, white-hot anger. How could he? How could he look me in the eye every day, kiss me goodnight, tell me he loved me, and be living this double life? The questions clawed at me, demanding answers I didn't have. I wanted to scream, to shatter something, to obliterate the image of the man I thought I knew. I looked at the key in my hand, the key to a safety deposit box. A box I now suspected filled with more than just his jewelry, filled perhaps with the tangible proof of his deception. The cold metal of the key felt like a brand against my palm. I had to know. I had to see what was in that box. It was a compulsion, a desperate need to confront the reality of his betrayal, to stare it in the face and acknowledge its ugliness. I stood up, my legs feeling wobbly. I needed to get to that bank. But how? The key was just a key. It didn't have an address, a bank name, nothing. I went back to his desk, my eyes scanning every surface. Maybe there was a clue there. A bank brochure? A deposit slip? Nothing. I felt a surge of frustration bordering on panic. I was so close, yet so far. I then remembered the envelope the receipt came in. I tossed it aside on the kitchen counter. I went back to the kitchen. The receipt was still there. I picked it up, and then I looked at the back of the envelope. There, in David's neat handwriting, was a bank name and an address. A bank I'd never heard of, in a town about 40 minutes away. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. This was the lock. I grabbed my purse, my keys, and my phone.
The sun had already begun to set, casting long, distorted shadows across the lawn. I didn't care. I had to go. I had to see what was in that safety deposit box. As I backed out of the driveway, I glanced at the house. It looked so ordinary, so peaceful. But inside, a storm was brewing, and I was driving straight into its eye. The key in my pocket felt heavier than ever, a promise of discovery, a harbinger of ruin. I didn't know what I would find, but I knew one thing for certain. My life, the one I thought I had, was already over, and the real discovery was just beginning. The drive felt endless, the darkness outside mirroring the growing darkness within me. Each mile was a step further away from the man I thought I loved, and closer to the stranger he clearly was. The air in the car was thick with unspoken questions, with the suffocating weight of betrayal. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, my gaze fixed on the road ahead, a road that now seemed to lead only to more pain. The bank was one of those sterile, modern buildings that could be anywhere, really. Gleaming chrome, tinted windows, the hushed efficiency of people dealing with money. It was late, after closing hours, but they had a special appointment set up for me. I'd called them earlier, my voice trembling, trying to sound calm and collected, explaining that I was David's wife and had an urgent personal matter. The woman on the phone had been professional, sympathetic even, and gave me the address and a time. I felt a flicker of relief, but it was quickly swallowed by the churning dread in my stomach. I parked the Subaru, the engine's quiet hum a stark contrast to the frantic thrumming in my chest. The key felt like a burning ember in my pocket. I walked up to the imposing glass doors, my reflection staring back at me, pale, drawn, a stranger in my own skin. A uniformed security guard, a man with kind eyes and a weary smile, greeted me. He'd been expecting me. He led me through the hushed lobby, past rows of empty teller stations, to a small private office. It was tastefully decorated, all muted blues and grays, a far cry from the chaotic storm raging inside me. "Mr. Henderson will be with you shortly," the guard said, gesturing to a plush chair. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? No, thank you, I managed, my voice raspy. I sat down, my hands clasped so tightly my fingers ached. The silence in the room was deafening, amplifying the frantic beat of my heart. I kept replaying David's words in my head, his easy laughter, the way he'd hold me at night. Was it all a lie? Every single moment? The thought was an icy stab, twisting in my gut. A few minutes later, a man in a crisp suit entered. He introduced himself as Mr. Henderson, the branch manager. He had the kind of polished demeanor that radiated calm competence, but his eyes held a subtle curiosity. He sat opposite me, a manila folder on the desk between us. "Thank you for coming in, Mrs.
Miller," he began, his voice smooth and measured. "I understand you have some questions regarding a safety deposit box." I nodded, unable to speak. I fumbled in my pocket and pulled out the tarnished brass key. I held it out to him. This is the key to my husband's box." Mr. Henderson took the key, examining it with a practiced eye. He then opened the folder. "We have a record here, box number 3B, rented by David Miller." He looked up, his gaze steady. "Is there a specific reason for your inquiry, Mrs. Miller? Is everything all right?" The dam broke then. The carefully constructed composure I'd been clinging to shattered. Tears welled up, blurring the edges of the room. I don't know where he is," I choked out, the words tumbling over each other. "He's been acting strangely, and I found this." I gestured vaguely towards the key. "And I found some things, bank statements from an account I didn't know about, a receipt for a very expensive necklace." Mr. Henderson listened patiently, his expression sympathetic but professional. He didn't offer platitudes, just quiet acknowledgement. When I finished, he closed the folder. "I understand this must be a difficult situation, Mrs. Miller, and I want to assure you that we take your concerns very seriously." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Accessing a safety deposit box requires specific procedures. If you are concerned about your husband's well-being or his financial matters, we can discuss options." "I just need to see what's in the box," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "Please, I need to know." He considered for a moment. "Under normal circumstances, without the account holder present, or without a court order, we cannot grant access. However, given the circumstances you've described, and as you are listed as his spouse," he tapped the folder, "there's a process, a joint access agreement, or if the account holder is declared missing or incapacitated." "He's not missing," I said, a bitter laugh escaping me. "He's just gone, and I think I know why." The image of that expensive necklace, of that unknown bank account, flashed in my mind. "I think he's seeing someone else." Mr. Henderson's gaze softened slightly. "I see. This is a deeply personal matter, Mrs. Miller. We are bound by privacy regulations. However, if you wish to proceed with attempting to gain access, you would need to fill out some forms. We would also require a photograph of Mr. Miller, and perhaps a notarized statement from you regarding your concerns and the circumstances." My head swam. Forms, notarized statements. It felt like an insurmountable hurdle, another layer of bureaucracy on top of the emotional devastation I was already experiencing. "But isn't there any way? I just need to know." My voice was a desperate whisper. He looked at the key again. "This key is only one part of it, Mrs. Miller. The box itself has a dual lock system. We have the other key here. We cannot open it without both."
He leaned forward. "Perhaps we can start with the paperwork. I can give you the necessary forms to begin the process. It will take some time, of course." "Time?" I repeated, the word hollow. "How much time?" "It can vary," he admitted, "depending on verification, any legal requirements. A few days, perhaps longer." A few days. I couldn't bear to wait a few days. Every second that ticked by felt like another nail in the coffin of my marriage. I looked at the key, then at the man sitting across from me, his face a mask of professional empathy. The urge to scream, to demand, to break down was overwhelming. Is there anything else you can do?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Anything at all?" He hesitated, then spoke in a lower tone. "Mrs. Miller, while I cannot bypass official procedures, I can tell you that when a box is rented under a spouse's name, and in cases of marital distress, we can sometimes facilitate a guided viewing of the contents under specific circumstances and with our security present, should you choose to formally apply for access. It's not standard, but in exceptional cases, a guided viewing. That was something. Not immediate, but a step closer. What would I need to do for that? I asked, my hope a fragile butterfly fluttering in my chest. He explained the process again, more thoroughly this time. The application, the notarized statement, the need for proof of marriage and my identity. He assured me that once the application was processed, if approved, they would contact me to schedule a time for me to come in and view the contents. He handed me a stack of official-looking papers. "Take these," he said. "Read them carefully. Fill them out as completely as possible. Bring them back to me or any of our tellers, and we will initiate the process." I took the papers, my hands trembling. The weight of them felt immense, the physical manifestation of the unraveling of my life. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice still weak, but with a new, grim determination. I left the bank, the night air feeling colder than before. The drive back to Northwood was a blur of headlights and shadows. My mind was a relentless carousel of accusations and doubts. Was I overreacting? Was I jumping to conclusions? But the evidence, the hidden jewelry, the secret bank account, the expensive receipt, it all pointed to a deep, deliberate deception. I pulled into my driveway, the house dark and silent. It felt like a tomb. I let myself in, the familiar scent of home now tainted with suspicion. I walked into the living room and collapsed onto the sofa. The papers from the bank spread across the coffee table like a morbid tarot reading. I picked up the receipt again. The diamond necklace. Who was it for? The question gnawed at me. I stood up and walked into the bedroom. David's side of the closet was half empty. His favorite navy blue suit, his collection of expensive ties, his worn leather jacket, gone. Panic, sharp and cold, seized me. He hadn't just been hiding things, he'd been preparing to leave. Or he'd already left. I rushed back to the kitchen, my eyes scanning the counters. I was looking for anything. A note? A suitcase? And then I saw it, tucked beneath a pile of mail on the counter. A small, crumpled piece of paper. A hotel receipt, dated 3 days ago. A key card attached. It was a hotel across town, a place David had never mentioned. My stomach clenched. He'd been living a double life, and I hadn't even suspected. Not really. Not until that Tuesday. I grabbed the receipt, the key card, and my purse. I had to go to that hotel. I had to see what I would find. The thought of walking into a room where he might have been with someone else, it was an agony I couldn't comprehend. But the need to know, to confront the reality of his betrayal, was a powerful, almost primal force. The drive to the hotel was a torment. Every red light, every slow driver felt like a deliberate obstruction. The darkness outside seemed to mock my internal turmoil. When I finally arrived, the hotel was a sleek, impersonal building, all glass and steel. I walked up to the front desk, my heart pounded. "I'm here to see about a reservation," I said to the night clerk, a young man with bored eyes. "Under David Miller." He typed into his computer for a moment. "Ah, yes, Mr. Miller, room 714. But he checked out this morning." Checked out. This morning. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd missed him. I'd missed him by mere hours. The finality of it, the stark evidence that he was truly gone, was crushing. Did he leave a message?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The clerk shrugged. "Not that I'm aware of. He just paid his bill and left." I stood there, numb. My world had imploded, and I was left picking through the wreckage. I looked at the room number on the receipt, 714. A desperate impulse seized me. I had to see that room. Can you tell me if that room has been cleaned yet?" I asked. He glanced at his computer. "Not yet. Housekeeping is on their rounds. It should be ready in about an hour." Could I just see it?" I pressed, my voice gaining a desperate edge. "It's a personal matter. I think he might have left something important behind." He hesitated, then a flicker of sympathy crossed his face. "Look, I can't let you in without permission, but if you wait a bit, and if housekeeping is done, you could probably just walk in. They don't lock them immediately after they finish cleaning." I thanked him and sat down in the lobby, my mind racing. An hour to brace myself for whatever I might find in that room. An hour to contemplate the ruins of my life. The key to the safety deposit box felt like a heavy weight in my pocket. It was a promise of answers, a promise of confirmation.
But first, I had to confront the immediate aftermath of David's disappearance, the empty space he'd left behind, the chilling realization that the man I loved was a ghost, a stranger who had walked out of my life without a trace, leaving me with only questions and the cold, hard key to his secrets. I looked at my watch. 30 minutes down, 30 minutes to go. Each tick of the second hand felt like an eternity, a slow march toward a truth I was no longer sure I wanted to uncover. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I couldn't turn back. I was already too far down this rabbit hole. The hotel room, the safety deposit box, whatever lay inside them, they were the next steps in a journey I never asked for, a journey that had begun on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday. I waited in the sterile lobby, the plush chairs doing little to comfort the raw ache in my chest. The hours stretched into an eternity, each minute a fresh stab of anxiety. The young clerk eventually gave me a curt nod. "Room 714 is ready," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. I didn't respond, just stood and walked towards the elevators, my legs feeling like lead. The ride up was agonizingly slow. The hallway on the 7th floor was dimly lit, the carpet a muted beige that seemed to absorb all sound. I found the door, its numbers stark against the polished wood. Taking a deep breath, I reached for the handle. It was unlocked. Stepping inside, the air was thick with the faint lingering scent of hotel cleaning products, overlaid with something else, something vaguely masculine. It wasn't David's cologne, but it felt familiar. The room was a standard hotel room, a king-sized bed, a nightstand, a desk with a chair, a small television. It was impeccably clean, sterile even. Housekeeping had done their job. I walked slowly, my eyes scanning every surface, every corner. On the nightstand, next to a Gideon Bible, was a small folded piece of paper. My heart leaped into my throat. I picked it up, my fingers trembling. It was a note, written on hotel stationery in David's distinctive, almost calligraphic handwriting. "I'm sorry," it read. "I never meant for it to get this far. I know I've hurt you. I can't fix this. I can't fix me. Don't look for me. Just try to be happy." That was it. No explanation, no farewell. Just a sterile apology and a plea for me to move on. The coldness of it was almost worse than the betrayal itself. Don't look for me. But I had the key. I had his secrets. I couldn't just let him disappear into the ether after all this. I walked over to the desk. Tucked beneath a discarded promotional flyer for the hotel spa, I found it. A small, discreet black wallet. It wasn't David's usual wallet. This one was sleeker, more expensive. I opened it. Inside there were a few credit cards, a driver's license, but the cash compartment was empty. And then I saw a small folded photograph. My breath hitched. It was a picture of a woman.
She was younger than me, maybe late 20s, with striking dark hair and a vibrant smile. She looked happy, genuinely happy. She was leaning into David, her arm around his neck. They were at some kind of outdoor event, a festival perhaps. It was a picture that spoke of intimacy, of shared moments, of a life I was not a part of. A wave of nausea washed over me. This was her, the woman he'd been buying jewelry for, the woman he was spending money on, the woman he'd chosen over me. I stared at the photograph, my vision blurring with tears. The sheer audacity of it, the casualness with which he documented his infidelity was staggering. He hadn't even tried to hide this part of his life. He'd kept it in his wallet, accessible, a constant reminder of his double life. I suddenly felt a surge of anger, hot and fierce, consuming the grief. He was sorry? He wanted me to be happy? How dare he? How dare he inflict this pain on me and then expect me to just move on? I wanted to rip the photograph to shreds, to scream at the empty room, to shatter the illusion of peace that the hotel had so carefully maintained. But then, a different thought, a colder, sharper one, cut through the haze of my emotions. He'd checked out this morning, but what if he hadn't gone far? What if he was still nearby? He'd left his wallet. Was that an oversight? Or was it intentional? A way to ensure I'd find it? To know he was gone? I looked around the room again, more critically this time. I checked the closet. Nothing but a few empty hangers. The drawers and the dresser were empty. The bathroom was spotless, devoid of any personal effects. It was as if he'd vanished into air, leaving behind only this hollow shell and the devastating evidence of his betrayal. My gaze fell back to the desk, the note, the wallet, the photograph. And then my eyes landed on something small, tucked away in the corner of the desk, almost hidden by the lamp. It was a small electronic key fob. It looked like one of those access fobs for high-security buildings, or perhaps a car. I picked it up. It was heavy, metallic. It had a small button on it. And then I remembered. David had been talking recently about a new project at work, something about a secure data storage facility he was helping to set up. He'd mentioned needing special access, key fobs. Could this be it? Was this key fob also tied to his secrets? Was it another piece of the puzzle? Another lock he'd placed between us? My mind raced. If he'd left this behind, it meant he wasn't planning on coming back for it. It was either forgotten or deliberately discarded. But the note, "Don't look for me," that implies he knew I would look. He knew I would find things. Perhaps he even wanted me to find some things, to push me away, to finalize his departure. But a key fob, what did it open? I looked at the key fob, then at the photograph of the woman. Was this key fob for her apartment? For a shared space?
Or something even more clandestine, something related to his work that he'd been using for other purposes. The possibilities swirled, each one more unsettling than the last. I slipped the photograph and the key fob into my purse. I couldn't stay here any longer. The sterile perfection of the room was suffocating. I needed to get back home, to the safety of my own space, to process all of this. I walked out of the room, closing the door softly behind me, leaving the empty space where David had briefly existed, a ghost in a hotel room. The drive back to Northwood was a silent battle against the urge to break down. The photograph of the woman felt like a physical weight in my purse, a constant reminder of David's deceit. The key fob, on the other hand, felt like a mystery, a potential weapon or a tool that could lead me to more answers. I clutched the steering wheel, my knuckles white, my gaze fixed on the winding suburban streets that now seemed alien and hostile. I thought about the safety deposit box, about the jewelry, about the hidden account. And now, this woman, this hotel room, this mysterious key fob. It was a tangled web, and I was caught right in the middle of it. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the house still looked quiet, still unassuming. The Subaru's headlights illuminated the familiar facade, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within me. I got out of the car, the key fob feeling heavy in my hand. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, the silence of the house now a suffocating blanket. I walked straight to the kitchen table, laying out all the evidence I had gathered: the bank statements, the jewelry store receipt, the hotel receipt, the photograph, and the key fob. It was a grim collection, a testament to David's betrayal. My eyes landed on the key to the safety deposit box, still in my pocket. It felt like the anchor in this storm, the one thing that could potentially provide concrete, undeniable answers. But the key fob, that was a new variable, a new unknown. I picked up the key fob and turned it over in my fingers. It was sleek, metallic, with a single small button. I pressed it. Nothing happened. No lights, no sounds. It was inert. What did it open? A surge of frustration coursed through me. David had left so many clues, yet so many unanswered questions. He'd orchestrated his exit, leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for me to follow, but he'd also left deliberate dead ends, or at least things I couldn't immediately decipher. I sat there for a long time, the paper spread out before me, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. The initial shock and anger had settled into a deep, bone-weary sadness. I looked at the photograph of the woman again. She was smiling, carefree. Did she know about me? Did she know that David was married? Or was she just another victim of his deception? The thought brought a strange, twisted sense of solidarity. We were both, in our own ways, being played.
But the key fob, it felt important. It felt like the missing link, the piece that would unlock a different part of his secret life. I turned it over again, trying to find any markings, any clues. There were none. It was just a plain black fob. Then a thought struck me. The office. David's home office. It was still in the state I'd found it in on Tuesday, meticulously clean, almost unnervingly so. But before that, before he'd apparently cleaned it, I remembered his desk being a controlled chaos of wires, gadgets, and papers. Could there be something there that related to this key fob? Some device, some access panel, some clue he'd overlooked in his haste to erase his tracks? I stood up, a new resolve hardening within me. The safety deposit box was one answer, but this key fob felt like it could lead to something even more immediate, more revealing. I walked into his office,
the air still carrying that faint ozone-like scent of electronics. His desk was bare, the surface gleaming under the dim desk lamp. I ran my hands over it, searching for any hidden compartments, any loose panels, anything out of the ordinary. Nothing. I moved to the wall behind the desk. It was just drywall. I tapped it, listening for any hollow sounds. Then my eyes fell on a small, almost invisible seam near the corner, partially hidden by the baseboard. It looked like a discrete access panel. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knelt down, my fingers searching for a latch or a release. I found a tiny indentation. I pressed it. With a soft click, a section of the wall popped open, revealing a small, dark cavity. Inside, nestled on a piece of black foam, was a sleek, black terminal-like device. It looked like some kind of secure data storage unit, or perhaps a communication hub. And next to it, a small, recessed slot, perfectly sized for the key fob. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the fob. This was it. This was what it opened. I looked at the device, then at the key fob. It was a direct link to David's secret world, a world built on lies and hidden compartments. I took another deep breath, steeling myself for whatever might be on the other side of this lock. I inserted the key fob into the slot. The device hummed to life, a soft blue light illuminating the cavity. A small screen flickered on, displaying a login prompt. And then I saw it. In stark digital letters, it asked for a password, and I had no idea what it could be. All the evidence pointed to betrayal, to a secret life, but not to the specifics of his passwords, his codes. I stared at the screen, the blue light casting an eerie glow on my face. I knew, with a sickening certainty, that whatever was behind this lock, it was going to be the final piece of this devastating puzzle, and I had no way to access it. Frustration, despair, and a gnawing fear washed over me.
David had left me with a locked door, a final barrier between me and the truth, and the key fob, so promising just moments before, now felt like a cruel joke. I was so close, yet so utterly shut out. The blue light of the screen pulsed, a silent, mocking reminder of the secrets I was so close to, yet so far from unlocking. David, ever the meticulous planner, had left me with a locked door, a final, impenetrable barrier. I slumped against the wall, the cool drywall a stark contrast to the burning frustration in my chest. I had the key to the safety deposit box, a tangible promise of confirmation, but this was different. This was a direct portal to his clandestine world, and he'd ensured I couldn't get through. I sat there for what felt like hours, tracing the outline of the access panel, the key fob still warm in my hand. My mind reeled, cycling through every possible password David might use. His mother's maiden name? Too obvious. Our anniversary? I'd tried that. His dog's name from childhood? I'd never even known his dog's name. He'd been so deliberate, so careful. It was infuriating. I was drowning in his deceptions, and he'd left me with a life raft that had a hole in it. The initial wave of anger subsided, replaced by a profound, hollow weariness. I looked at the photograph of the woman again, her vibrant smile now seeming like a cruel taunt. Was she privy to his passwords? Did she know about this hidden compartment, this secret digital life? Or was she just as oblivious as I was, a pawn in his elaborate game? The thought brought a fresh pang of hurt, a twisted sense of empathy for someone I didn't even know. We were both trapped in the wreckage of his lies. I finally stood up, the weight of the day settling onto my shoulders like a physical burden. I couldn't stay here, in this room that was a monument to his deception. I needed to be somewhere familiar, somewhere that didn't scream of betrayal. I closed the access panel with a soft click, the sound echoing the finality of David's departure. I kept the key fob, a useless artifact now, a symbol of the ultimate secret he'd taken with him. The drive back to my own home felt longer than the drive to the hotel. The familiar streets of Northwood, once a source of comfort, now felt haunted. Every house, every tree seemed to whisper of the life I thought I had, a life that had been nothing but a carefully constructed facade. I pulled into my driveway, the house dark and silent, just as it had been when I'd left. It felt like a grave, and I was the sole mourner. I let myself in,
the stillness of the house unnerving. I walked through the rooms, the emptiness amplifying the ache in my chest. I went to the kitchen and sat at the table, the remnants of the day's discovery spread before me. The bank statements, the receipt, the photograph, the useless key fob, and the key, the tarnished brass key to the safety deposit box.
That was still my one remaining hope for concrete answers, for undeniable proof. I picked up the key, its familiar weight a small comfort. Mr. Henderson had given me the paperwork. I'd filled it out, my hands still shaking, my mind a blur of fear and dread. He'd promised to expedite it, given the circumstances. I'd left the bank feeling a fragile sliver of hope, a desperate need to know. Now, that hope felt like a distant memory. I looked at the stack of papers, Mr. Henderson's neatly printed instructions. I had to go back. I had to see what was in that box. The thought of confronting David's secrets, of holding the tangible proof of his infidelity, was terrifying. But the alternative, the gnawing uncertainty, the possibility that I was wrong, or the even worse possibility that I was right, was unbearable. The next morning, I woke up with a dull ache in my head and a grim determination in my heart. The sun was shining, the world outside continuing its oblivious march. I dressed slowly, choosing clothes that felt neutral, unremarkable. I didn't want to draw attention to myself. I was just a wife, a woman wronged, seeking answers in the sterile environment of a bank. I drove back to the bank, the same sense of dread clinging to me, but this time it was tinged with a steely resolve. The security guard at the door recognized me, offering a small, sympathetic nod. Mr. Henderson was waiting for me in his office, the same one I'd sat in just yesterday. The manila folder was there again, but this time it was thicker. "Mrs. Miller," he said, his voice calm and professional. "I have the necessary approvals processed. Your access has been granted, under the conditions we discussed." He slid the folder across the desk. "You'll need to sign here." My hand trembled as I signed the release forms, each stroke of the pen a commitment to a truth I was terrified of discovering. Mr. Henderson took the signed forms, and then he stood up. "If you'll follow me, please," he said, his tone quiet. He led me away from the hushed opulence of his office, down a corridor I hadn't seen before, towards a heavy steel door. It felt like entering a vault, a place where secrets were kept under lock and key. He swiped a card, and the door hissed open, revealing a dimly lit chamber lined with rows and rows of metal boxes. The air was cool and still, carrying the faint scent of metal and paper. "Box number 3B, he said, gesturing to a specific row. He unlocked a small, discreet panel on the wall, revealing a second keyhole. "We'll need your key for this one, and my key here. This is the dual lock system." I fumbled in my pocket, pulling out the tarnished brass key. My hand was slick with sweat. I handed it to him. He inserted his key, then I inserted mine. There was a faint click, and then, with a smooth motion, he pulled open the heavy metal door of box 3B. The contents weren't what I expected. No stacks of cash, no incriminating documents.
It was a small velvet jewelry box and a single, thick manila envelope. My heart pounded in my ears. I reached for the jewelry box, my fingers brushing against the soft velvet. I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of satin, were two pieces of jewelry. One was a delicate gold bracelet, intricately engraved. The other was a breathtaking diamond necklace, the one from the receipt. It sparkled under the dim light, its brilliance almost blinding. It was undeniably expensive, exquisite, and it was clearly meant for someone else. The necklace, with its cascade of diamonds, was a declaration of love, a tangible symbol of a love I had clearly lost. A choked sob escaped my lips. This was it, the proof, the undeniable evidence of his betrayal, laid out before me. It wasn't just the money spent. It was the intent, the planning, the secret affection, all hidden away in this metal box. The woman in the photograph, this necklace was for her. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air out of my lungs. I looked at Mr. Henderson, his face impassive, professional. He'd seen this before, I was sure. The shattered lives, the quiet despair.
He waited patiently, offering no judgment, just quiet efficiency. Is there anything else?" I managed to whisper, my voice raw. He gestured to the manila envelope. "This was also in the box, Mrs. Miller." I reached for the envelope, my fingers numb. It was sealed, addressed simply to my wife. My breath hitched. This was it. The final explanation, the confession, the goodbye. My hands shook as I tore open the seal. Inside were several sheets of paper, neatly stacked. It was a handwritten letter, in David's familiar script. My eyes scanned the first few lines, and the world tilted on its axis. "My dearest," it began, "if you are reading this, then I have failed. Not in my work, but in my life. In our life. I know you must be angry, confused, heartbroken. And for that, I am truly, profoundly sorry. I never intended to hurt you. But I can't live with the lies anymore. Not the ones I told you, and not the ones I told myself." My vision blurred with tears. It was a confession, a desperate attempt to explain. "You found the bank statements, the jewelry. Yes, it was for someone else. Her name is Sarah. She's an analyst I've been working with on a top secret project for the last year. It's classified, highly sensitive work. My job demanded absolute discretion, a separation from my personal life. It was meant to be a clean separation, a way to protect us. But Sarah and I, we fell in love. It was stupid, reckless, unforgivable. I know that. I tried to end it, multiple times. But the work, it consumed me. And she understood the pressure I was under. She became my escape, my confidant, my everything. The words swam before my eyes. Classified project. Separation. He was an analyst. This wasn't the David I knew.
The David I knew was an architect, a man who built beautiful, tangible structures, not some spy, some secret agent operating in the shadows. The safety deposit box, the letter continued. It was to safeguard certain documents, highly sensitive information related to my work, information that if it fell into the wrong hands could have catastrophic consequences. I had to keep it secure, separate. The jewelry, it was a mistake, a moment of weakness, a desperate attempt to compartmentalize my life, to keep you from suspecting. I know how foolish that sounds now. I regret it more than you can ever imagine. My head spun. Sensitive documents, classified work? It was all so Hollywood, so unbelievable. Was he making this up? Was this another layer of his deception? A grand, elaborate excuse for his affair? "I am leaving the country," the letter stated, "under a new identity. The project I was working on, it's reached a critical juncture. My knowledge is now too valuable and too dangerous to remain on American soil. I have been briefed. I have been prepared. It's a one-way ticket, a permanent assignment. I can't come back. I can't contact you. It's too risky, for me and for you. A one-way ticket, permanent assignment. He wasn't just leaving me for another woman. He was disappearing. He was a spy, a fugitive, someone I had never known. The man I loved, the man I married, was a complete stranger. The anger that had been simmering within me suddenly cooled, replaced by a chilling emptiness. I know this will hurt you deeply, and for that, I am truly sorry. I have loved you, always. You are the best part of my life. But I was never strong enough to be the man you deserved. I hope, someday, you can find peace, find happiness. Don't let this destroy you. Live your life. Be happy. I will always carry you in my heart." It was signed, simply, David. I stood there, in the sterile silence of the vault, the letter trembling in my hands. Tears streamed down my face, not of anger or betrayal now, but of a profound, soul-crushing grief for a life that had never been real, for a man I had never truly known. The necklace, the diamonds, the hidden compartment, the key fob, the secret project. It all made a twisted kind of sense. A narrative so outlandish, it could only be true.
He hadn't just cheated, he had lived a lie, an elaborate, dangerous deception that had finally consumed him and us. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat softly. "Mrs. Miller?" I looked up, my eyes red-rimmed, my face a mask of devastation. I held out the letter, the necklace, the jewelry box. "Take them," I whispered, my voice raw. "Destroy them. I don't want any of it." He took the items with a quiet nod. "As you wish." I turned and walked away, out of the vault, out of the bank, out of the sterile environment that had held the final, devastating confirmation of my shattered reality. The world outside seemed impossibly bright, impossibly normal.
The sun shone, cars drove by, people laughed. They had no idea of the implosion that had just occurred within me. The drive home with a blur. I didn't cry anymore. The tears had dried up, leaving behind a desolate landscape of grief. David was gone. Not just gone from me, but gone from the world as I knew it. He was a phantom, a ghost of a man who had built a life on secrets and lies, and had finally vanished into the shadows. I pulled into my driveway, the familiar house now a monument to a ghost. I walked inside, the silence deafening. I went to his office, the place where the access panel had been. It was just a wall now, a perfectly normal wall. The key fob sat on my dresser, a useless trinket. The necklace, the bracelet, the letters, they were gone, incinerated by Mr. Henderson as I had requested. But the truth, the devastating, unbelievable truth, was etched into my soul. I sat on the sofa, the quiet of the house pressing in on me. There was no revenge, no confrontation, no closure in the traditional sense. David had simply dissolved, leaving behind only the wreckage of my life and the echo of his manufactured existence. The anger had faded, replaced by a profound sense of loss, not just for the man I thought I loved, but for the life I thought I had. It was a hollowness that would likely never be filled. I looked out the window, at the perfectly manicured lawn, the familiar suburban street. It all seemed so unreal now, a stage set for a life that had been nothing but a performance. I was alone, adrift in a reality that had been rewritten without my consent. The key to the safety deposit box was gone, the contents destroyed. The key fob was a silent reminder of a locked door I could never open. I closed my eyes, the image of David's smiling face from the photograph flashing behind my eyelids. It was a lie, a cruel deception. But underneath the lie, there was something else. The genuine pain in his letter, the desperate plea for me to be happy. Perhaps in his own twisted way, he had loved me. But his love had been overshadowed by his secrets, by the demands of a life I could never comprehend. The finality of it settled over me, a heavy, suffocating blanket. There were no more questions to ask, no more doors to unlock, just the quiet, unbearable truth. I took a deep, shaky breath, the air filling my lungs with the scent of emptiness. The world kept turning, but mine had stopped, and I was left to pick up the pieces of a life that had been nothing but a beautiful, elaborate lie. The silence in the house was no longer just quiet. It was profound. It was the sound of absence.